Okay, let's get started then. Once again, thanks everyone for joining today, and welcome to today's Ethical Toy Program webinar, Family Friendly Spaces, Impacts, Achievements and Opportunities. We're pleased to be joined by around 50 delegates registered from Europe, America and Asia. So a very warm welcome to you, wherever you're joining us from on today's webinar. And alongside audit, certification and factory capability building, worker wellbeing really is a core part of the Ethical Toy Programme. And today's webinar really is an opportunity for us to update you and share some of the work that we've been doing for 4 years now on advancing worker wellbeing supply chains. Since 2016, we've piloted and scaled programs to support domestic migrant workers, promote family-friendly workplaces, and also advance women's empowerment at factories, both in China, but also increasingly other toy sourcing countries as well, where our program operates. So on the webinar today, it's really an opportunity to learn more about our family-friendly spaces program, specifically, which we've been running at toy factories across China. Today, we'll start by sharing background information on some of the issues facing migrant parent workers in China, but also other manufacturing areas, and also explain how worker wellbeing programs can help address these issues. We'll also share highlights from our 2019 Family Friendly Spaces program and explain how this program is working to support factory workers and their children, but also delivering some really important and very relevant business benefits for the factories that are participating as well. So looking across the full spectrum of impacts and benefits. Finally, we'll outline opportunities for your company to participate and support the program in 2020 and beyond. So I'm Mark Robertson, Senior Vice President at the Ethical Toy Programme, and I'm pleased today that I'll be joined by two expert speakers from the Centre for Child Rights and Corporate Responsibility, or CCR-CSR for short, who are our implementation partners on the FFS programme. So we're going to be joined today by Shui Yan Gao, who's Project Manager at CCR-CSR, and also Hao Kai, who's the Business Development Manager at CCR-CSR. We're going to be speaking for around 45 minutes, and then we'll leave some time at the end for your questions. You'll find that all your microphones are muted, but you can ask a question at any point during our presentations using the text box on the right-hand side of your screen. And then we'll obviously come and answer these questions at the Q&A section towards the end of the webinar. Just to let you know that the session today is being recorded, and we will make the recording available to you at the end of the session in case you or a colleague want to listen again. We also publish our webinars via our YouTube channel, which you can find if you search under Ethical Toy Programme. Okay, great. So a very quick introduction to us for those of you that don't know us. So the Ethical Toy Programme then is the ethical supply chain program for the global toy industry. And we work with thousands of brands, retailers and suppliers around the world really to drive ethical standards and deliver improvements in the toy supply chain. Our core mission is focusing on supporting workers and raising standards and strengthening manufacturing through ethical production. Just a few kind of headline stats on the scale and scope of our work. So as I mentioned, our core focus is on the toy, play and entertainment industry, but increasingly we're working across other manufacturing sectors as we continue to grow the scale and scope of our work. Across those industries, part of our role is setting the standard for ethical toy production, and we do that through a multi-stakeholder approach, working with the industry, NGOs, civil society actors as well to set the standard for ethical manufacture. We also conduct social audits and factory certification, which covers over 1,000 factories in China, but increasingly countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and other areas of the world. A key part of our work increasingly is broadening factory training and capability building. So that's something that we deliver across all factories in our program that we work with. And then, of course, as we're going to be focusing today, our program really does focus on driving worker well-being at factories. And there's different components to this work, one of which is our worker helpline, which has been running since 2011 and supporting thousands of workers in China with day-to-day issues. But of course, the other programs that we will be talking about today on issues relating to women's empowerment, but also migrant workers as well. We also play a big part in driving collaboration to improve standards across supply chains, both factory to factory collaboration, but also enabling factories to work together to raise standards. Okay, so just to start off then with really a brief update on, or introduction really to the issues which migrant parents workers face in the toy industry and other industries. So, as you may be aware, in common with many other countries or manufacturing centres around the world, millions of workers have migrated domestically in China in search of work. And often this involves workers moving from small rural towns and villages to larger cities in search of jobs or new opportunities. And what this means is that in countries like China, there are significant, we've seen significant shifts in terms of migrant labour. An estimate suggests that there's around 247 million migrant workers in China. For many workers, bringing their children with them when they make this move from their hometowns to larger cities has been a challenge, and there's kind of many reasons which create the challenge, if you like. But one of the main ones is challenges around childcare and a lack of childcare support facilities when migrants make the move. And what this means is for significant numbers of workers in China, one of the key issues the challenges they face is living separately from their children. And government statistics suggest that within China, there's around 15.5 million children who are left behind. And what that means is that they live separately from one or more of their parents who have migrated domestically to find work. And as you can imagine, the scope of separation is a challenge for parents. Obviously, not living separately from your children makes it difficult to build a relationship and to strengthen bonds. But one of the other challenges that workers face is often because of distance is that they have to go through a prolonged period of time before they get to see their children. And we do find that for quite a large percentage of workers who live separately from their children, they often only get to see them once or maybe twice a year during periods such as the Chinese New Year. So the extent of separation can be quite extreme, but the duration of separation is also quite pronounced. And this creates real challenges, both within kind of the relationships, but also within factories as well. And surveys that we've done show that as many as 80% of migrant parents that we've surveyed with CCR-CSR said that they don't get to spend enough time with their children. Not just an issue in terms of parents and child relationships, though, a really important issue for factories and for supply chains. Being separated from their children is a difficulty that workers face on a day-to-day basis in their working lives, and it can be disruptive at the factory level as well. And we know that around 30%, over 30% of workers have had to leave their job to take care of their children, for example. But also living separately from your children creates real issues for workers in relation to their general well-being. So obviously, workers are often quite worried about their children if they're not able to monitor and see them on a day-to-day basis. This means they can be distracted, perhaps not as committed as they might be, and often are unable to make longer-term commitments to their jobs in factories. So it's a real challenge from a well-being perspective, but also an important business challenge as well, which does impact factories who are affected by the issue. I would say that obviously we're talking about the toy, play, and entertainment industries today, but these issues really do play out across other sectors and industries in China. And it's not just China as well. Increasingly, the more that our program continues to globalize, we do see other patterns in other countries as well, as workers migrate domestically or even internationally to find work, but have to leave their children behind. So I think a lot of the themes that we'll be talking about today are certainly relevant to other countries as well, not just China. So what we're going to be looking at in more detail today is really what we've been doing to respond to the challenges that I've just outlined. And there's really two key compartments to the work we've been doing. One of which is family-friendly spaces, and the second area is migrant parents training. So family-friendly spaces then are essentially factory-based childcare facilities which we set up at factories. And the key objective really is reuniting migrant parent workers with their left behind children. And the way the programs work is that we focus on providing childcare during the summer school holiday months, which is a time when traditionally left behind children are often at risk because they're looked after in their hometowns, often by their grandparents, who don't always have the kind of financial or other means to look after them properly. So the idea of the program is that we create safe and secure spaces within factories that enable workers to spend more time with their children. And we'll be hearing a lot more about how those programs, how their spaces work, and also the benefits that they bring on the webinar in a second. The other section of the work that we do focuses on migrant parents training. So we complement the Family Friendly Spaces program with training that we deliver to workers, really to strengthen their skills, their remote parenting skills, and enable them to build stronger bonds with their children. So these are half-day workshops that we run in factories that are focused on improving remote parenting skills, as I said, but also strengthening relationships through things like role play, workshops, and other practical skills to strengthen bonds with children. Finally, the kind of key part of the program is what we call after-school clubs. So essentially, these are childcare facility programs which are similar to the family-friendly spaces, but actually provide support year-round. So they operate beyond the summer school holiday months in China to provide year-round childcare for workers. And that really exists as a resource not only to support workers who live separately from their children, and therefore provide better childcare, which increases their opportunity to bring their kids with them when they move. But they're also there to support workers who have children that live locally but struggle with day-to-day childcare resources. So that's the program in essence. But I'm now going to hand across to Sri-Yuan and Hao, who are going to just explain in a bit more detail about how the programs operate, but specifically how the programs can operate to address the left behind children problems in China. So over to you.
Thanks, Mark, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. It's really glad to join the webinar today, and I'm very happy to have you here with us. Hi, Annie, I think we can move to the next one, please. A little bit about ourselves. As Mark mentioned earlier, the Center for Child Rights and CSR is the implementing partner for the FFS program with IETP. We've been collaborating over the years on this particular program. We are a social enterprise aimed at improving the child rights footprints of international brands and global supply chains, and to create positive impact for both workers, children, and particularly migrant parent workers in the supply chain. So the Family Friendly Spaces program is really ties into this core mission, and benefits, I think, all the stakeholders involved in a very meaningful way. As Mark mentioned, the issue, especially the separation from the children, but also the challenge workers face when they do bring their children with them in their migration, really is a challenge for both the worker themselves, but also for the factories in terms of productivity and worker retention, but also a key issue for the brands. The program really helps to address this need of parent workers and try to improve their parent-child relations, but also create a happier and more engaged and dedicated workforce for the factories as well. In terms of how the program works, the setup process, so we work with IETP this webinar is to introduce the program to you, the brand partners, and then around early spring and summer, we will offer an information sessions directly to the factories as well. And then in spring, we'll start with the pre-assessment process. So basically, we will visit the factories who are participating in the program to assess both the safety of their proposed venues. We try to understand the workers' conditions and needs, but also try to help the factory to plan their preparation through that period. And then after the pre-assessment, we will produce a baseline report for the factory with very concrete suggestions on how they need to renovate the space in terms of staffing, management, how they deliver the summer service, and etc. And then early summer, we will organize a staff training for all the factory staff who will be responsible for the FFS in the summer. This is really aimed at to create a sustainable program inside the factory so that the suppliers and their staff really have the tools and know-how to independently carry out the program continuously. So after the staff training, throughout the early summer month, we will, both our team and IETP's team will support the factory during the setup. So both the renovation, the staffing, and the preparation to start open the center at the beginning of the summer holiday, usually it's mid-July in China. And then our team will go back to the factory for a pre-launch visit to make sure the preparations are in order. And then in the middle of the summer, we will return for a midterm monitoring visit to see how the factories are doing. We'll try to address some of the challenges. We'll give them recommendations. And then at the end of the summer operation, usually in mid-August, we will return for the last time again to conduct an impact assessment with the factory to really understand the benefits of the program, which we will elaborate a little bit more later on. And then after that, in the second half of the year, we will roll out the migrant parent trainings, which is in factory, focusing on kind of consolidating the positive impact by providing workers with practical communication and parenting skills to kind of continue and maintain that bond they build over the summer. Next slide, please. I think there might be a slight a bit delay on the screen.
Hi, yeah, I think there is probably apologies, there is a slight delay.
Mark, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you. I think there was a slight delay on the update of the slides, but I think most people can now see
yeah.
the second one, yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I shut up. Thank you. Yes. So in terms of what is required or what is needed from the factory side, Really, there are two components. One is kind of the hardware. So the factory will need to make some basic investment into, renovating the space. As you can see below in the pictures, kind of transform the space into a child-friendly environment and safe for the children as well. And also, for furnitures, teaching materials, books, toys, this kind of hardware, which the factory need to make some basic investments into. And then the second big component is, in terms of personnel and investment in their time. Most factories will need to hire 1 or 2 professional teachers for the summer months. Of course, all these preparation will be closely supported and monitored by our teams. So you can see this, one of the example of the CFS setup is really kind of a transforming an empty space into a really child-friendly environment. So I will hand back to Mark to go through some of the key highlights from the past few years program.
Perfect. Thanks, Howard, for that. Just before I do, just a reminder to all of you that if you want to ask questions, then please do go ahead using the questions box just on the right hand side of your screens, and we'll get to those towards the end. I can see 1 or 2 questions coming in, which is good. Okay, so then now to run you through really some highlights from where how the program's grown, but where we've got to today. So, as I said, worker wellbeing really now is a kind of key part of the Ethical Toy program, and the worker wellbeing programs that we've focused on really are designed to kind of complement the audit and assessment work, and also the factory training capability building sides of the work that we do to raise standards at factories for workers, and obviously meet the requirements of our brand and retailer members as well, and support them in their supply chain aims and objectives and responsible sourcing programs. So we very much see this as a key part of our work and complementary to all the other work that we do to raise standards in supply chains. As I mentioned at the beginning, we first launched the Family Friendly Spaces program back in 2016, and we initially started off with a pilot running at just 2 factories in China, really just to kind of test out the program and and learn really from an initial kind of smaller scale pilot. And right from the outset, it was clear that the Family Friendly Spaces program was an incredibly positive and really impactful program for workers, for their children, but also, as I said earlier, for the factories that participated. And since we first launched the program back in 2016, we've continued to grow the program year on year. Since the initial pilots, we actually expanded the program to cover a total of 30 factories running across 5 provinces in China this year. And that's enabled us to obviously scale the number of workers that we're bringing into the program and supporting, but also the number of children as well. So this year, we were able to support a total of 2,764 workers and 2,386 children have actually basically been reached through the program since we first launched it. Another thing to mention as well is a real key benefit of the program is its sustainability. So as we explore the business benefits in a bit more detail, which really underlines the positive impacts on the factories that participate, we really are seeing that once factories join the program, we continue to see them remain and stay in the program year on year. And that's, I think, because it's really clear that once factories run this family-friendly spaces beyond year 1, they want to make an ongoing commitment because of the important business benefits that they see. So if we reflect on the program this year, of the 30 factories that ran family-friendly spaces, 13 were factories that joined the program for the first time in 2019, but 17 of those were repeat factories. And and that really just gives you a sense of how sustainable the program is. Pretty much 100% of factories that join the program in year one have gone on to repeat it in subsequent years, which is why, with support of brand and retailer sponsors, we're able to kind of grow the program each year beyond that. Across those 30 factories in 2019, we had capacity to support 1,100 children. So the vast majority of those children were migrant children, and 74% of children attended the spaces for the first time. So obviously, as we repeat the spaces, some children will have joined in previous years, but each year we try and expand and grow the spaces when they're repeated at factories, which enables us to bring more and more children into the spaces as well. The range of children that participate in the spaces tends to kind of range from 3 to 13 years. So probably the majority of children that participate would be between the kind of 5 to 10, 11 age range. And the program, again, in 2019, across all the factories, supported around about 1,200 workers. 60% of those were female and 40% male. As I'll explain, the program is really we're able to expand and develop the program through the support and sponsorship of our brand and retailer members. And I'll talk more about who they are towards the end of the presentation today. But we were happy to bring on 7 sponsors this year, 5 of which were repeat sponsors and 2 were new sponsors. This year as well, we slightly broadened the types of factories that participated in the program. So 18 of which were from the electronic and plastic toy factory space. 9 were printing factories, which is a reflection of the growing scale and scope of our program as we support different industry types. And then 3 were from the wooden toy factory doors and ride and toy space. We're really pleased as well to see the kind of geographical spread of the program as well. So beyond our initial pilot that was in Guangdong, we're now pushing the program to spread to other provinces in China, which you can see on screen as well. So that's something that we'll continue to do as we extend and broaden the scope of the program. What's really exciting as well about how the programs continue to develop year on year is the kind of broadening activities that we run through the Family Friendly Spaces program. And on screen now, you can get a sense of the different activities that we ran during this year's Family Friendly Spaces across the 30 factories that joined. And really, the idea with the Family Friendly Spaces is that we want the spaces to be fun, dynamic, educational, and engaging spaces that provide a really good opportunity and experience for the children that participate in them. So we'll hear a bit more from Sriran in a second about how we do that. But essentially, that involves making sure that we have that well-trained staff and support available to run exciting, interesting, and engaging activities for the children. But also, increasingly, we're using the spaces as an opportunity to develop parent-child activities as well. So focusing on activities that enable workers to spend really valuable time with their children and really kind of strengthen the bond with them. So this year, certain factories in the program organised days out for children and their parents, which enable them to spend valuable time together. So we had cooking lessons, joint day trips out to do local attractions and other visits. So I think as we continue to invest and develop the program, that's really where we want to focus our attention and look at new ways to strengthen parent-child bonds and relationships. So I'm now going to hand back over to Sriran, who's just going to do a bit of a kind of deeper dive on analysis and impacts from the factories that were new to the program in 2019.
Hi, yes, Mark. So from here, I will briefly touch on some of the key impacts we've measured into the 2019 program from the 13 new centers that opened for the first time. These 13 centers served over 400 children, and close to half of them were actually left behind children, which were the key target of this program. So the next one, please. When it comes to children, really, of course, safety is the most primary concern here. We really, through a very comprehensive both assessment process, but also management and training process to ensure safety of these spaces, both in terms of the safety of the physical space. As I mentioned in the pre-assessment process, one of the most important component is we conduct this very comprehensive assessment on health and safety, both in the actual space itself for the children, but also the surrounding areas, the factory compound, the dormitory, and et cetera, to ensure that these spaces are safe for children, and we make concrete recommendations on renovation. But also we, through a very rigorous management procedure and the training we gave to the factory staff to ensure that the daily management also ensure the safety and security of the children and their well-being. These are really, very well recognized by participants as well. So among parents this year, we had a 98% approval in terms of safety. And in terms of the general feedback for the program, it's also very positive. 98% of the parents say the children had a good time at the centers. 97% thinks the teachers at the FFS are very professional. And 98% said they get to spend more time with their children because of the being reunited for the summer month. These clearly had a clear impact on the parents who participated in the program. We see that after the program, really amazing results. 71% of the parents say they are less worried about their children, and 44% say they're more efficient. 48% say they're happier at work. So across the board, we really see a very positive outcome for the well-being of the workers, but also a very tangible positive impact both on productivity, and workers are clearly more focused and more engaged as well. As you can see from this quote from a father of 2 daughters, really the FFS program enabled him to reunite with his 2 daughters who was left behind at hometowns, and really offered him an opportunity to improve his relationship with his children. In terms of the direct impact on the children who participate in the program, one of the most significant results is really a reduced hours of children being left unattended, which was a key risk we, through past evaluations, we identified for both left behind children and migrant children who are often left unattended for long hours. So before the centers were set up, the baseline measured an average 36.6 hours per week that the children were left unattended. But then after we offered the FFS to the workers, that hours has been significantly reduced to an average of 16.5 hours, which is a very significant improvement for both the safety and also the well-being of the children. And we also do see very positive impact on the children's development as well, because these most of them are left behind children who really lack stimulation in their environment. A lot of the times, being left with their grandparents or very little opportunities for socialization or interaction with other kids. So after 2 months in the summer, really in this very engaging and educational environment, we see a very positive outcome where parents report the children became more confident, become more outspoken, become more active and better at self-expression as well. The next one, please. Yeah, so as you can see, we also directly collect a lot of feedback from the children themselves, which are very positive towards the wide range of activities that's offered at the center, which really gave them like a fun but also engaging summer holiday. So at the factory level, these positive impact on the parents and the children really manifest into a positive trend within the factory in terms of their worker well-being and also retention and worker relations. So after the program, we saw a 29 percentage point increase on worker management trust, and we also saw 17 percentage points increase in worker believing their factory actually care about their well-being. On the other front, we saw 18 percentage increase where in terms of workers' relationship with their direct supervisor. For example, in a lot of times this reduces frictions when parents have to take extra leave in the working hours to look after their children, or reduce the chances of parents have to bring their children to the production floor, for example, which is in a lot of cases we see as a key compliance risk, but also reflects that a lot of parents really don't have an alternative. On the other hand, we see a 12 percentage points after the program in terms of worker satisfaction with their workplace. So in the short window of 2 months, is really a very noticeable increase in these indicators. And these overall really translate into a very positive impact on worker retention. So we see a 10 percentage point increase for those who plan to stay in the factory for 2 years or longer, which we use to measure as a retention indication. So we really see that the program kind of cultivate this engagement and loyalty from the worker who really recognize the factory as supporting their role in their families as well. Another noticeable feature is we see a clear spillover effect. So we not only record these very positive impact for workers who directly benefit from the program, the parents, but we see even in the general workforce, by showing that the factory really care about their worker and are working to improve their well-being and their families' well-being, the general workforce really also recognize these efforts. So we see even among non-participants, we see a 5 percentage increase in management understand their challenge, and 8% increase in worker who believe the factory care about them. As in a testimony from a factory manager, that we notice our workers become more enthusiastic and also focus at work and really understand the company cares about them, and they're willing to work harder in return. So here I'll hand back to Mark to talk about why brand get engaged in this program.
Thanks very much, Hao. That was a really good run through, I think, of the benefits that we see across the program, and really just to really summarise those before we move on to the next bit of the webinar. I think as hopefully we've demonstrated, the program, the Family Friendly Spaces program, really, in many respects, our experience of it has really been a win-win program. So the support that it offers to workers and their children, I think, is pretty obvious and very, very clear. But also, it really does fit with within the remit of supporting factories, strengthening their business, supporting in areas such as recruitment, retention of workers, building trust between workers and management, and even resulting in boosts in things like productivity amongst workers that participate. We've even tracked broader benefits amongst workers that aren't participating in the family-friendly spaces directly themselves, but are working at factories where they operate. And when they see these family-friendly spaces operate, we've seen that boost their commitment to the factory as they see the factory invest in the general well-being of their workforce. What we find increasingly in pretty much all toy manufacturing centres is factories increasingly having to compete more and more for workers in a competitive marketplace. So the more that factories are able to invest in programs which enable them to recruit and retain workers critically, particularly after major holiday events when many workers don't often return back to work, that's a really, really important benefit for them. And I think it's really, really key in terms of strengthening factories' commitment to the program. So a definite win-win, but also for supporting companies, as I'll explain in a second. Obviously, childcare is a key issue for migrant parent workers, as we've outlined, and the program, specifically addresses that. And we've talked in great length really about the multiple benefits in terms of worker well-being, but I think it's important to recognise how that really doesn't just stop at the worker level. It has kind of more wider benefits. So if we just quickly reflect on the benefits for brands and retailers in supporting these programs in your own supply chains, our experience over the last 4 or 5 years has really highlighted the different ways in which supporting family-friendly spaces and other well-being initiatives in your supply chain helps you meet the various commitments that your company may well have made in relation to responsible sourcing and human rights. And certainly, what we really do see is that the family-friendly spaces is a way for companies which participate in the program to really demonstrate your commitment to protecting child rights and advancing worker well-being in your supply chains. So by supporting or sponsoring family-friendly spaces in your factories in your supply chain, you're able to fulfill commitments under things like the child rights and business principles, which are devised by UNICEF and Save the Children, amongst others. But also, it's a way of helping you meet your relevant commitments through the Sustainable Development Goals as they apply to areas such as child rights and women's empowerment issues and general worker well-being and decent work. But of course, as well, the family-friendly spaces also fit very much within the UN guiding principles, and particularly the requirements to protect, respect, but also remedy impacts arising from your operation. So obviously by providing support to workers who have moved or migrated domestically, providing support through the Family Friendly Spaces program, we're really helping brands understand how that fits within the broader kind of UNGP's framework. And increasingly, brands and retailers are really attracted to these kind of interventions in their programs and these kind of initiatives because they see it as part of a broader kind of remedy or UNGP guided approach to in supporting well-being. Also, from a brand retail perspective, increasingly, worker well-being, as we've evidenced today, is really a way of increasing resilience in your supply chain. So the more that that factories or your suppliers are able to invest with your support in worker well-being, the better that is for their business and therefore for you as their customers. So again, that's all about supporting factories in key areas like recruitment, retention, better productivity, and all the other benefits we see when brands retailers sponsor this kind of work. And again, what we're really passionate about the Ethical Toy Program is investing in programs along with our brand and retailer and factory partners that really do deliver long-term rewards and are scalable. So one thing that's particularly exciting really about the Family Friendly Spaces program as it's evolved so far, is it's really as a long-term program. And as I've explained already, pretty much all the factories that have joined so far have gone on to repeat the spaces in subsequent years with only minimal support needed from our side. But also the program itself is therefore scalable. So once we've made the initial investment at the factory to set up the spaces, they can then run in subsequent years, and that enables us to take the funding and support to continue to grow the program exponentially. So where do we want to go? Looking ahead to 2020 and beyond, so next year will be the 5th year of implementation. All the factories, the 30 factories that joined the program this year, will do so again next year, which is fantastic news. Our target for next year is to open a minimum of 50 FF family-friendly spaces, and that would include 20 new factories and obviously the 30 repeat. We also want to accommodate at least 1,500 children, but we want to go much further than that next year. And increasingly, we want to look at childcare support needs beyond China. For us, one of the largest countries outside China for toy production is Vietnam, and then countries like Indonesia and Malaysia. The childcare needs of those different countries varies. So what we will start to do next year is look at what kind of programs make sense, particularly in Vietnam, where we do see a high percentage of workers who perhaps live close by to factories with their children, but don't have the childcare support they need. So definitely looking to grow and expand in China, but also increasingly in different countries in Vietnam as well. As I've said, we couldn't do this work without the support of our program sponsors, and you can see the main program sponsors on screen now. So obviously we're very thankful to Lego and Target, who are some of the kind of key brand and retailer sponsors that enabled us to roll out this year's program. Likewise, TUV Rhineland and HAPE are other sponsors that have really helped us to expand. We also, another critical part of the program really is the support that we get from our other types of sponsors. So we have gift sponsors who enable us who support the program through things like gifts that are distributed to the children that participate, and other types of support is provided by other brands, retailers that we can't mention publicly, but certainly does exist to help us continue to grow and expand. So really multiple benefits as explained. As I said, sponsorship offers an opportunity for you to incorporate child rights and business principles into your strategy, demonstrate your commitment to that, play a leading role in creating family-friendly supply chains more broadly and enhancing worker well-being, and enabling you to ensure that the products that you're sourcing are manufactured in a way that's consistent with the values of your brand or the industry as a whole. So with that, I'm now going to move on to just quickly talk you through, or really acknowledge, if you like, the kind of key factories that participated in this year's program. So won't run through all of these, but as you can see, a really nice broad selection of different factory types. And like I said, we'll continue to grow and expand this in subsequent years. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the Q&A part of the webinar. So again, if you haven't sent your questions in already, then do so now. We'll just unmute Hao and Shuyan. Just bear with me a moment. Okay, excellent. So hopefully, Shuyan, you can hear us now, or certainly Hao, I think you can. So Hao, first question for you, I think. Question we've got: how do I select suppliers to participate in the FFS program?
Yes, so I think a few kind of the key criteria we would recommend brand to look into when you kind of circulate this program with your supplier is, first of all, we would look at your strategic suppliers, your key suppliers in the country that you kind of have a long partnership and a very solid working relationship to really get their commitment, and they're willing to invest as well into these kind of initiatives. And secondly, we recommend looking at the needs. For example, if the factories have a significant amount of migrant worker and particularly parent workers. Some factories actually in China, it's already starting to, on their HR workers, already tracking, their workers' children, because it is quite a well-recognized issue. So perhaps you can already get some data from your supplier on the indication of, how many children they have, and how many of them are migrant children or left behind. Or you can simply look at some of the demographic numbers, like the age of your worker, if they are, if predominantly female or in the age of between 25 to 45, then you get a sense that probably there is a very clear needs of children aged between 3 to 13.
Sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, I think these are kind of the few key criteria that you should consider.
Thanks for that. And I think just to respond from our side as well, certainly, I think the kind of advantage that we bring, being able to approach this at a kind of cross industries perspective, means that we can obviously use the other insights that we have at factories to help identify which suppliers or which factories will be most appropriate. So, in selecting factories or shortlisting factories for the Family Friendly Spaces program, in addition to the kind of criteria that Hao just outlined, we also look at things like, what does audit data tell us in terms of the general kind of environment at factories and whether or not these kind of programs are suitable. We are able to kind of leverage our team's expertise on the ground in China, which enables us to kind of, with CCR, CSR, go and visit factories, understand their suitability, but also gauge the appetite, if you like, among senior management at factories and suppliers, and build the commitment if the commitment's not there, but also get a sense of that as well. Obviously, we want to make the program open and as inclusive as possible, but it's important to understand the general context and operating environment of factories to make sure that we can deliver these kind of programs with confidence and move forward with a more detailed risk assessment. Next question that I'll have a first stab at, and then invite Shriyuan and Hao to come in as well. How do these programs align with UNICEF's child rights and business principles? So, as I kind of outlined just towards the end, I think the short answer is very closely. So we have actually we do collaborate with both Save the Children and UNICEF on the kind of ongoing development and promotion of both these programs. But in terms of the child rights and business principles specifically, supporting family-friendly spaces in supply chains really is a way of directly meeting a brand's responsibility to respect child rights and commit to supporting the human rights of children. Obviously, the family-friendly spaces support child rights by reducing the separation that children might experience when they're left behind or live separately from their children, of course. But also they help to protect children, which may, at a time when they might otherwise be vulnerable and at risk of, potential hazards when they're not living directly with their parents. So there's lots of linkages really between the impacts that we've outlined today and the requirements around respecting and supporting children's rights as well. One of the other risks that the programme helps head off, if you like, is actually the risk of children or being in factories informally. So, without these kind of formal approaches to childcare support in factories, there is the risk that factories might try and set up or offer these kind of spaces informally themselves. But that's a real hazard. What we don't want to see is informal, family-friendly spaces operating, which are poorly managed and risk children, being in areas of factories where they shouldn't be. So, in terms of eliminating risks around children being in workplaces, then there's a tie in there. But I think the other requirement around providing decent work for young workers, parents, and caregivers is another key component of the child rights and business principles. And I think the links there again are obvious, but the program really is in essence designed to support brands and retailers and help them meet the commitments of the child rights and business principles. Again, as I said, also UN guiding principles and the Sustainable Development Goals all have requirements around strengthening protections for children and providing decent work. Under the decent work agenda, family-friendly spaces is obviously part of that. How, Shriyuan, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that one.
No, I think you already touched on the key points.
Okay, great. So another quick one that's just come in. Can non-member companies join this program? So in essence, yes. So we are obviously our core focus is on working across the industry, mainly toy, play, entertainment, but as I mentioned earlier, other sectors and industries. Also, we're always delighted to work with different types of companies, and we have had, for example, certain sponsors that have joined us as a Family Friendly Spaces sponsor and then gone on to use different aspects of our program. So we work with not just brands, retailers, but also licensors as well, across worker wellbeing and also audit certification. So yes, there are different opportunities to participate. And as a follow-on to today's webinar, we'll be sharing the slides from today, but also a brochure which explains a lot more about how the programs work. Some of the impact data we've shared will also explain opportunities to participate as well. Next question for Hao or Shriyuan is around, if you can just explain a bit more about what the priorities might be in Vietnam compared to, say, China in relation to family-friendly spaces and childcare support.
Yes, I think I'll take this one. In Vietnam, for example, CSR has a lot of experience outside the toy sector, for example, in the garment and footwear. So we worked quite extensively with UNICEF on their Better Business for Children program in Vietnam. But we see very similar kind of challenges as well. In Vietnam, I think our assessment put left behind children as 20%, which is less compared to China, but still quite a significant number of workers do had to leave their children behind. But also another challenge we see in Vietnam is relatively high costs of childcare, but also the kind of disparity of qualities of childcare. So we do see in Vietnam factories, workers have to quite heavily rely on private childcare service providers, but the qualities are a lot of those private services have very large disparity in terms of quality and also the care given to children. But I think there are definitely a lot of opportunities in Vietnam in that area to directly support factory workers by providing similar programs.
Great, thanks for that. Another question, what type of commitment is required from sponsors, brands, retailers, etc. to support the program? So there are different, as I explained, there are different ways in which brands and retailers can participate and join the program. So the main way is through sponsorship. So in essence, how that works is we will work with whether a members or a non-member company to firstly help you identify factories that would be appropriate for the family-friendly spaces program using the criteria that Hao and I outlined earlier. Once we've done that, then our team will help to engage factories on that list and secure sell in the program, explain what it is, how it works, build factories' commitment to participate and to join the program, and then working with CCR, CSR, particularly for new factories, will then take responsibility for working with the factory to set the spaces up, risk assess, deliver, and then conduct detailed impact assessment. So really, from a brand retail perspective, it's mainly it's about us working with you to identifying potential or suitable factories to join, and then you then sponsoring delivery of the program across your factories. And there's various degrees in which our members and partner companies are doing that. So some will have particular factories in mind that they've sponsored. Others will look to us to kind of identify those for them. But we're really pleased to see that the companies that have joined and sponsored so far is a growing list year on year, and the commitments that each brand retailer is making continues to grow exponentially too, I think, as they see the benefits. Okay, so I think we're pretty much out of time now. I can see there's one or two more questions that have come in that we'll try and follow up with people directly. But for now, I will draw today's webinar to a close. So let me take this opportunity again for thanking our speakers from CCR CSR and thanking all of you for taking time today to join the webinar. Like I said, we will be sending some follow-up resources that will hopefully explain more about the program, and will include links for further information. So please do get in contact if you have further questions. But for now, I will draw today's webinar to a close, and thank you again for joining us. Thank you very much.